We change it. It's full.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم ربنا لك الحمد والشكر كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك منك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. اللهم اجعله خالصا لوجهك الكريم لا ابتغاء سمعة ولا شهرة ولا رياء. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. MashaAllah, so good to see you all again, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for those who fasted today, Allah ta'ala accept your fast, may Allah ta'ala accept your dua, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emancipate us and free us from Jahannam, inshaAllah ta'ala, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it a Eid Mubarak to everybody, inshaAllah ta'ala. Last week we saw how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent a delegation of about 85 men and about 18 women to Habasha, to Abyssinia. And we saw how Rasulullah sallallahu rationalized that, and he said that there is in Habasha a king who is just. And this king, though a Christian, but Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam recognized this quality of justice. And justice is a very, very important concept. It's a universal concept, but Islam pays a particularly special attention to the question of adala, of justice. And Islam, al-adala mutlaqa, ghayr nisbiyya. Justice is absolute and not relative in Islam. Meaning, when it comes to the application of justice, there should be no favoritism. It should be impartial, which is very difficult to do. Very difficult. Especially when justice, when you have to stand up against somebody you love. That's very difficult. And that's why the ulama say there are two things that often prevent people from justice. Al-hub wal-karahiyya. Love and hate. Love, how does love stop us from being just? When you love somebody, but you know they've done wrong, and you have to stand against them because of justice, it's very difficult. Many times people won't stand up for justice because the person who is in the wrong is somebody they love. And if you look at the life of Rasulullah ﷺ and the life of the Al-Khulafa al-Rashidun, the rightly guided Khalifa, or Khulafa, Abu Bakr to Ali radiallahu anhu, they all applied this justice impartially. Many examples where non-Muslims would come to seek arbitration from the Khalifa and against the Muslim, and the Khalifa would stand with the non-Muslim against the Muslim because of haqq, because of adala, justice. And karahiyya, hate, also can stop us from being just. When you hate somebody, even though they might be correct, even though they might be right, but you may not fulfill justice towards them because of hate. And that's why Allah wa ta'ala categorically said in the Quran, لا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا. Don't let the hatred or the enmity that you have with somebody else stop you from being just. Be just. That is closer to taqwa. So adala is impartial. In Islam, it is absolute, but ulama say not relative. And that's why Rasulullah recognized this in the quality in Najashi, and we also must recognize it. Wherever you find adala, we must recognize it. Wherever we find a system of justice or a person who stands up for justice, we must recognize that. And of course, the dialogue that happened between the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, Ja'far radiallahu anhu, who was the most articulate spokesperson of that group, and you heard the dialogue that happened. Accordingly, Najashi allowed them then to stay. He gave them safety. You could call them the first boat people, asylum boat people in the history of Islam, who literally, they had to go to Habasha, and they sought asylum, and they were given that asylum. And in that is a great example for any system that any government, any governor, any ruler that comes after, that it doesn't matter what is the religion or the religious background of the person who is seeking asylum. It doesn't matter. If we can provide them with justice and asylum, we should do so. Sadly, today in many parts of the world, this concept has been trampled upon. And alhamdulillah, there are still places where you find there is this justice, alhamdulillah. So now we're back to, while they are in Habasha, enjoying a climate of security and safety, which allowed them to practice their faith freely, which is very important. And the ulama have always said that deen can only flourish and prosper in an environment where there is safety and security, where there is aman and the absence of khawf. When there is aman, and you find this, if we are to be just with our analysis of Australia, you find to, alhamdulillah, a very large extent, we do have that justice and we do have that freedom to be able to practice our faith freely to a large extent. Yes, there are pressures, sometimes from here or there, but largely speaking, we could say we can practice our faith freely. And as I said, Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi and his student, and also Imam Shafi'i rahmatullah alayhim, they also said that which distinguishes one dar from the other, Dar al-Silm or Dar al-Islam from Dar al-Kufr and Dar al-Harb, is Mas'alat al-Khawf wal-Aman. Is the question of Aman, safety and security, and fear, meaning having to feel a sense of safety to practice your faith. In some places you feel fear to practice your faith. Believe it or not, in some Muslim majority countries, people sometimes frighten to practice their faith fully. And so this is an important concept. Anyhow, in Makkah meanwhile, now we are about the 10th year. In Makkah, three major events now happen. The first is the death of Abu Talib. Abu Talib, as you know, is the uncle of Rasulullah ﷺ. And he was his external support. He was the one who was defending Rasulullah ﷺ as much as he could. He loved him so much. And Rasulullah ﷺ loved him. And this is a very important point also, the question of loving a non-Muslim. Al-wala, this question of wala. Some people will come to you and say, Al-wala lillah wa rasuluh. Loyalty is unto Allah and His Rasul. We say, yes, of course. They say, but that means you shouldn't love kafir for some of the qualities they have. We say, hold on. Well, why did Rasul love Abu Talib? He loved him, did he not? Of course he loved him. And that's why the ulama distinguish between two types of wala. Wala dini and wala tabi'i. There is a wala, religious loyalty, and natural loyalty. Religious loyalty means loyalty to Allah and His Rasul in matters of deen, of course, where there is no compromise. Natural loyalty is the instinctive love that you may have towards somebody, be it because he is a relation, though not Muslim, or sometimes a spouse. Does not Islam allow a Muslim man to marry a Christian or a Jewish woman? Does it not? Of course it does. Aside from the technicalities, the basic principle is that Islam allows a Muslim man to marry from Ahlul Kitab. Is it possible that on one hand Islam says you can marry a Christian woman or Jewish woman but not love her? Is it possible? Of course not. You marry her because you love her. So that is the natural love. Natural wala. That is the wala, natural loyalty. In this case, Rasulullah had that natural loyalty and natural love towards his uncle Abu Talib. And why should he not? He was his foremost supporter. Sometimes your neighbor who's non-Muslim could be really good to you. Is it conceivable in our deen that to say you should hate him, even though he's good to you? You should frown at him. He's a kafir. You shouldn't show any loyalty. No, you have to distinguish between natural loyalties and religious loyalties. Religious loyalties means if the neighbor is non-Muslim and tomorrow has a Christmas party, we don't join in the Christmas party. Religious loyalty. Because our loyalty is towards our deen. And our deen says there are only 2 festivals. And Christmas denotes a Christian festivity that marks a very important Christian principle. And we say we can subscribe to that. So you say to the neighbor with a nice big smile, thank you very much for the invitation, but I can't attend the Christmas party. But does that mean you should be rude to the neighbor? Does that mean you should be insulting? No. In fact, the neighbor, and you may have come across that, I have certainly come across some non-Muslim neighbors who are beautiful, who are fantastic, and you cannot help but have that natural love towards them, right? And what that natural love does makes you have natural loyalty. What is that natural loyalty in this case? It means if they are not at home and you see there is something wrong happening in the house, you run to help, right? You don't just say, oh, they're kuffar, I'm not going to do anything. It's not like that. It doesn't work like that. So Rasulullah had that natural loyalty and natural love to Abu Talib. And now when he was on his deathbed, and remember, this was after the siege, the sanction of 3 years, and he was with him, Abu Talib. Though not a Muslim, but he was right next to him. And then now he's dying. And Rasulullah, because of that love in his heart, because of that concern in his heart, because of that affection in his heart, Harisul alaykum. Has not Allah described him as Harisul alaykum? He's concerned over you. Ra'ufur rahim. He's gentle and compassionate. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Was he not concerned for the Islam of the Jewish boy? Aside from his uncle, put the uncle aside for now, who was his foremost external supporter. The Jewish boy who served Rasulullah for 10 years. And then he was dying. And they came running to Rasulullah, oh Rasulullah, that Jewish boy who was serving you, he is dying. So Rasulullah rushes to his house. Harisun alaykum. He is concerned over your affairs. And he goes and stands next to his head. And the Rawi, the narrator of the hadith, says when he walked in, his face was full of sadness. And one thing about Rasulullah, you could read his emotions on his face. When he was happy, his face was lit like a full moon. Alayhi salatu wassalam. And so when he sat next to the Jewish boy, what is the first thing that came in the mouth, on the tongue of Rasulullah? Atashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna rasul. Would you take shahada? The concern, natural love. Would you take shahada? Before you die, would you take shahada? And the boy looked at his father. And the father said, Ati' Abul Qasim, obey Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The boy said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and then passed away. The narrator says, when Rasulullah walked out of that room, he was shining like a full moon. Why? Because this is the concern of every Muslim. How people can be saved from the fire of Jahannam and how they can go to Jannah. Compare this to what is happening now with Abu Talib. He's on his deathbed, just like the Jewish boy. And Rasulullah comes, sits right next to him, just like he did with the Jewish boy. And he says to his uncle exactly what he said to the Jewish boy. He says, my dear uncle, just say the kalima, so I can be a witness for you on the day of Qiyamah. Allah. In the case of the Jewish boy, when he looked at his father, the father said, obey Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In the case of Abu Talib, who was also there? Some of the chiefs of Quraysh, shayateen. They came and stood. And when they came there before Rasulullah, they were there before Rasulullah. When Rasulullah came and he saw a gap between them and Abu Talib, he wanted to sit there, they blocked that gap. So he stood there. Can you imagine the scene? I don't think we can. And he says to him, he says, oh my, قُلْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَشْهَدُ لَكَ بِهَا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. and I will be a witness for you on the day of Qiyamah. But who's sitting next to him? The shayateen. They were saying to him, how could you leave and abandon the faith of your forefathers? And so he said, Abu Talib, if I was to take the Shahada, then the Quraysh, yu'ayyiruni biha, they will mock me. And so he did not take the Shahada. He died without the kalima. The sadness that penetrated the heart of Rasulullah is unimaginable. Neither I nor you, especially if we are born Muslims, we cannot understand this. If you are born Muslim, your father is a Muslim, your mother is a Muslim, your aunties are Muslims, your family are Muslims, and they die in Islam, you will never understand what it means for a relative to die as a non-Muslim. We can talk about it day and night. Unless you are a convert to Islam, and your father is a non-Muslim, and your mother is a non-Muslim, or your aunties or your sisters are non-Muslim, and you have that deep-seated desire that they can take Shahada, and they die right before your eyes without taking Shahada, they only know that feeling. Go and speak to some of the convert brothers and sisters and ask them about that feeling. Recently I was reading about a sister, a convert sister, who said, she would beg her father, she would go and sit next to him and just beg him, please, just take the Shahada, just like Rasulullah ﷺ, please take it. And she said he would refuse. He was very nice to me, she said. He was always kind to me. He was always supporting of me. This is recent. And 3 months before he died. She said, I tried everything with him, and I would say to him, please, my father. And she said, I'll explain to him about Jannah and Jahannam and the grave. There is a life after this life. I want you to go to paradise, my father. And she said he wasn't listening. Until one day she received a phone call from her auntie. The auntie says, come now, your dad wants to speak to you. She said, I went with so much excitement. I went to see him with so much excitement, hoping that he would say the kalima. And as soon as I got there, because the father had been very sick now, she said, I sat next to him and he said, I will. She said, you will what? He said, I will become Muslim. She said, you have no idea the joy that brought to my heart. In the case of Rasulullah, we have no idea the sorrow and the sadness that came in his heart. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's number one. Number two, the value of hidayah. You and I have been given hidayah. You and I have been given through the karam of Allah, the generosity of Allah, His qadr, His hikmah, and His ilm. For we don't deserve anything. You and I have been given the kalima la ilaha illallah. And the uncle of Rasulullah who was there with him, he was supporting him, he was not given that privilege. You know what this means? It means we can never, ever, ever thank Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala for this ni'mah. We can never, ever, ever thank Allah Ta'ala enough for this ni'mah. The ni'mah of hidayah. And that's why if everything was to be taken away from us, everything except hidayah, we are winners. And if everything was to be given to us, but hidayah was to be taken out of our hearts, we are losers. So brothers and sisters, thank Allah day and night. Thank Allah day and night for this ni'mah of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And because the sorrow and the sadness in the heart of Rasulullah was so deep, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala revealed to him the ayah of the Quran, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. O Muhammad, you don't give hidayah to those who we love. You don't. Allah is recognizing. You see how Allah is recognizing that He has love towards His uncle. إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. But Allah gives hidayah to whomsoever He wants. وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِالْمُهْتَدِينَ. And Allah knows only those who are guided. وَيَهْدِي إِلَيْهِ مَنْ يُنِيبُ. In another ayah, Allah Ta'ala says, and He guides to Himself whosoever wants. If you seek it, Allah Ta'ala will give it to you. This was one calamity. It was a musibah for Rasulullah. It was a musibah. Because he was in such a difficult situation and he was so vulnerable. And because of that vulnerability, he had sent those men and women to Habasha. And just as he came out of that siege, and his foremost supporter, Abu Talib, died. Can you imagine now the viciousness of Quraysh and the mushrikeen of Mecca against Rasulullah? It's like there was a wall that was guarding Rasulullah against all the attacks, and now that wall has been collapsed. And to make matters even worse, very soon after that, some say, some ulama, some mu'arrikheen and so on say a year after, more or less, Khadija radiallahu anha passed away. And if Abu Talib was his external supporter, if he was his external force, Khadija was his internal supporter. She was the internal force that gave Rasulullah the emotional support. She gave him the love and affection that he needed, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. She was there for him when he came from Bar Hira, and he said, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, cover me, cover me. She was there for him. She was there to console him, not only from that moment, throughout his da'wah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. She was 15 years older than him, as you know. And he did not marry any other person whilst he was married to Khadija radiallahu anha. 25 years they were married, radiallahu anha wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he had, one of the ulama said, one of the gifts that Allah Ta'ala gave him through Khadija is that all of his kids, except Ibrahim alayhi salam, were from Khadija. Ibrahim was from Maryam al-Qibtiyya, from Maryam the Copt, but all of his kids were from Khadija radiallahu anha. All the male progeny, as you know, died, except the female progeny. And all of his daughters, out of the 4 daughters, 3 died during his life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Fatima died 6 months after he died, alayhi salatu wasalam. Can you see the difficulties, and the tribulations, and the challenges that he had to go through, sallallahu alayhi wasallam? Khadija, and if you want to know the rank of Khadija radiallahu anha, all you have to hear is what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said about her in 2 Sahih hadith. In one of these Sahih hadith, he says, خَيْرُ نِسَاءِ أَهْلِ الدُّنْيَا. The best of the people, the best of the women of this dunya was Maryam radiallahu anha and Khadija radiallahu anha. A testimony from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And more so, he then sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, and the best of the women of Jannah is Khadija radiallahu anha. He mentioned her before any other woman, radiallahu anha. What an honor. If you have a desire, I have a desire, inshallah, when we go to Jannah, I want to meet Khadija radiallahu anha. I want to see this amazing, amazing woman. This brave, strong woman who was there for Rasulullah sallallahu. You know the Sahaba, they would wish sometimes for their skin to touch the skin of Rasulullah sallallahu, for the barakah, right? That's what they wished for. The Abdullah bin Ubay, the munafiq, the head of the munafiqeen, whom we will hear about him much more later. When he died, and he did all these terrible things against Rasulullah, his son, whose name was also Abdullah, was a Muslim, the son of Abdullah bin Ubay. What does he come to Rasulullah and ask for? He says, Ya Rasulullah, Wallahi, I know what my father has done to you, and I know what he has said to you, but I would like to make one request. What is it? He said, your shirt, O Rasulullah, so I can put it in the grave with him. Might it help him? The Sahaba, if Rasulullah embraced them, they would think this was more than anything, more valuable than anything on this dunya. And Khadija radiallahu anha spent 25 years with him. You can't even fathom the greatness of that. You can't even fathom it. 25 years eating together. 25 years, he would put the morsel of food in her mouth. Radiallahu anha. Why should she not be the Sayyida, the master and the best of the women of Jannah? And you've heard also before how Jibreel comes, alayhi salatu one day just to give Khadija salam. And to give her glad tidings of it. One of the things, one of the many things that she will have is Jannah, is the palace in Jannah. 25 years, this living together. 25 years, and she wasn't just any ordinary woman. She was there with him during good time and difficult times, and most of the time it was difficult times. She was doing very well before marrying Rasulullah in terms of dunya, in terms of business, a very well trade woman, a good, strong businesswoman, well recognized in the community, of astute family, of noble lineage. And Allah Ta'ala honors her to marry Rasulullah and spend 25 years with him. And now she departs. Again, we can't imagine the sadness that penetrated the heart of Rasulullah. And that is why the ulama call it Aam al-Huzn, the year of sadness. The year of sadness. He was a human being after all, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would feel sadness, he would feel sorrow, he would feel happiness, he would cry, he would smile, he would joke sometimes with the Sahaba, because he's not divine. He's not divine. He's a human being, the best of human beings. He's a Nabi and the best of the Anbiya alayhi sallam. And he's a messenger and the seal of messengers alayhi salatu wassalam. Khadija was the best and is one of the best role models for our sisters and mothers. And sadly, very few people know about Khadija. Very few of our young sisters and mothers know about Khadija. Very few people talk about Khadija in the house. Khadija radiallahu anha should be spoken about. She is the role model to our sisters and our women. She is a role model in the sense of showing how she also carried the burden of da'wah on her shoulders. Radiallahu anha. And she showed how to be a role model in terms of giving that support for the deen of Allah Ta'ala, because the deen of Allah Ta'ala will not stand on the shoulders of men only. It needs the shoulders of men and women and children, and we see this again and again. And Rasulullah was exceptionally sad. So now he lost his uncle Abu Talib, and he lost Khadija, his foremost supporter from outside, and his foremost supporter from inside. He become even more vulnerable. And when the Qurayshis see that, they increase their attacks on him, which forced Rasulullah to think of another place to go to. He has to go to another place. And this is also a demonstration of Rasulullah أخذ الأسباب, الأخذ بالأسباب, taking all necessary halal asbab in order to make sure that da'wah remains. And following on the footsteps of the prophets before him, who continued to give da'wah unabated, regardless of what happened, regardless of the rejection, regardless of the suffering, regardless of the persecution, they continued to give da'wah. He read, Allah revealed to him in the Quran, how Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam gave da'wah for 950 years, and only 80 people accepted Islam, yet did not desist, continued in his da'wah. And da'wah is the #1 mission for the Anbiya and Rasulullah. And though he loved Mecca, and though he had just buried his uncle Abu Talib, and he had just buried Khadija radiallahu anha, he had to think of another strategy. Mecca was not working for him. The rejection was overwhelming. The attacks increased. So he strategically then chose Ta'if, which was 60 miles away from Mecca. Ta'if was strategic for a number of reasons. One, it was, as in the books of Seera, it was al-Masyaf li-Aghniya Quraysh. It was, they had their holiday homes in Ta'if. The rich people of Quraysh literally had their holiday homes in Ta'if. Ta'if was more beautiful, was more palm trees, more gardens. The weather is much better than in Mecca. Mecca is a wadi, it's a valley, and it can get exceptionally hot. And Ta'if was cooler. In Adelaide, perhaps, if you've ever heard of Summertown, Summertown is in the hills. I was living in Summertown for a few years, right? And I found out that they called it Summertown, literally, because in summer, the rich people of Adelaide used to go and build their houses in that town and use it as a holiday home, hence Summertown. So Ta'if was the Summertown of Mecca. It was the time when the people of Mecca, the rich people of Mecca, they had their houses there, honestly. But also Ta'if was strategically located because economically it was the economic veins of Mecca. They had to come through Ta'if. And Rasul therefore did not just choose Ta'if randomly, which is very important for us. Sometimes people, we get involved in da'wah, those who are involved in da'wah, they think just do things randomly. Why? Because you're involved in the da'wah of Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala will look after you. Just do things randomly. It cannot happen like this. It cannot work like this. Learn from the Seera of Rasulullah. He has never done anything random. And despite the fact that Allah's qudrat and Allah's power and Allah's support is with him all the time. Anyone doubts that? Anyone doubts that the support of Allah was with Rasulullah? Of course not. Yet he taught us that this world is a world of cause and effect. And you must take all necessary means. Not random, not haphazard. Just do whatever comes. It's funny sometimes, I say, when it comes to deen, we don't want to use our brains. When it comes to dunya, we use our brains, hopefully, to the maximum capacity. You open a business, you want to learn everything about that business. You use your intellect, you ask everybody. No, you take all the halal means. Why? Because you wanted to succeed. When it comes to efforts for da'wah or deen, whatever happens, happens. It doesn't work like that. We have to plan for it. You got to strategize for it. You got to think carefully. You got to think strategically. Before you take a step forward in da'wah, we have to think about it. There's no such thing as haphazard. Here, look at what Rasulullah is doing. He chose Ta'if strategically. The other reason is that the chieftains of Ta'if, the chiefs of the tribes of Ta'if, there were two tribes that were very important in Ta'if. And Ta'if had hulafa, they had alliances. And there are two different tribes in Ta'if, each had alliance with different clans in Quraysh. And Rasulullah knew that very well, number one. So he chose Ta'if strategically. Because he said, if I could win Ta'if over, I could literally cut off Mecca and gain a very strong alliance in Ta'if. That's number one. Number two, did he walk to Ta'if or did he ride? 60 miles. Did he walk to Ta'if or did he ride? He walked to Ta'if. Who was with him? Zayd. Zayd, his son, his foster son. At the time he was adopted. But you know that the question of adoption and foster, it's a big story, we won't talk about it now. And he loved Zayd, and he loved Osama. Osama bin Zayd later. Why did he walk to Ta'if? Did he not have camels? Could he not have asked for a camel? It's hot. 60 miles is not a light walk. You know why he walked to Taif? Again, because Rasulullah thought strategically. Yes, he is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and yes, he has the full support of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, but he is teaching us also that when it comes to deen and the effort of deen, don't be stupid. Cannot be haphazard. They say he walked to Taif to fool the people of Quraysh. Two things he did: walk and took Zayd. Zayd, his adopted son, foster son. So there's two reasons. One, they say he walked to fool the people of Quraysh because they would never consider that he's going to walk 60 miles. They would thought he's just coming, a short distance and coming back. If he was riding, they may think that he's going somewhere for some reason and they may stop him. He thought, alayhi salatu, he took the asbab. And he took Zayd, not any other person. For two reasons he took Zayd. One, because he is considered his son, and they would say, it's just a normal outing. He's not taking anybody special, anybody important in Quraysh. It's his son, he's going for an outing. He will come back soon. But also because he trusted. He wanted somebody whom he can trust. He didn't want anyone to know about this trip. Right? And they walked to Taif. And he gets to Taif hoping that they would listen to him. The Arabs are known for their hospitality and generosity, regardless. At the very least, he was hoping, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, for some level of hospitality and generosity. But he was met exactly with the opposite. Not only did they reject him in Taif, can you imagine now that the feeling inside Rasulullah when you know that Mecca, you've tried everything in Mecca and it's not working. And you had to send some of your best Sahaba to Habasha. And now your uncle has died, and his wife died. And he's saying, where do I go now? But just like Nuh alayhi salam before, and Musa before, and Ibrahim before, they tried and they kept going. He goes to Taif, and in Taif, they slammed the door shut on his face, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Not only that, they did not afford him the basic hospitality of the Arabs. Not only that, they rebuked him, they abused him, and they kicked him out, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And they didn't just kick him out to say, just leave us and go by yourself. But as Ibn Kathir rahmatullah alayhi said, they brought their men and their children and the majaneen even of the town, those who were insane. They made two lines, according to Ibn Kathir, a huge line, some said 3 kilometers of bashar, humans. And they pelted him, alayhi salatu wasalam, with rocks and stones. And Zayd radiallahu anhu said, he said, I tried to protect him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as much as I could, but I couldn't. I couldn't protect him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May we all be sacrificed for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I am sure if you were there or I was there, we would do the same as Zayd. Inshallah. Zayd said, I tried. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam bled until his feet were, his shoes was clogged with blood. Until his feet stuck to the shoes because of the blood. And they kept shooing him away. They kept pelting him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, until they forced him to a ha'at. Ha'at means bustan, a garden of grapes, a vineyard. Because Taif was lush when he fainted, alayhi salatu wasalam. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Who's seeing all of this? Allah Azza wa Jalla. He knows what's happening. Allah Ta'ala could have, with kun, all he had to kun, destroy the people of Taif. But no, because Allah Ta'ala, He wants to teach everybody a lesson. That da'wah ila Allah is expensive. وَضَحُّوا بِالْغَالِي وَالنَّفِيسِ كَمَا يقول العرب. They sacrificed everything for da'wah ila Allah. Da'wah is a mission. For it all needs to be sacrificed. Everything has to be sacrificed. The prophets, some of the prophets were literally sacrificed for the effort of da'wah. He fainted, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to him an angel that was never sent to this earth before. And the angel said to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala has seen what they have done to you. And Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is saying to you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, if you wish, the two angels of the mountains surrounding Mecca, not Taif, Al-Akhshabayn, the mountains surrounding Mecca, you just give the command, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and they will collapse among the people of Mecca. We said adl is very important in Islam, justice. Justice here would demand retribution because of what they've done to Rasulullah, but something much higher and much more powerful and much grander sometimes than justice. You know what that is? Rahmah. Rahmah. Mercy. And that's why that's why the two most used attributes of Allah Ta'ala in the Quran is not Al-Adil or Al-Hakim. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he turns to Allah Ta'ala because he's connected with Allah. His mission is for Allah. The ulama say the only way a person can continue doing da'wah is when he or she are doing it solely for Allah Ta'ala, pure ikhlas. And al-ikhlas, the ulama define ikhlas in different ways. قال بعض العلماء الإخلاص أن يستوي عندك المدح والذم. يعني لو واحد مدحك مش فارق عندك، لو واحد ذمك مش فارق أيضا. ليش؟ لأنه عملك لله مش للناس. أنت ما عملت العمل حتى يمدحوك، وإن ذموك تقول الحمد لله تعلم الإنسان من خطأه، ولكن لله. هذا عملي لله ليس للناس. Definition of ikhlas is praise of people, and their criticism of what you do is equal in your estimation. If you're doing it for Allah, you're not doing it to gain people's praise. If they do praise you, this is from Allah Ta'ala, but you're not asking for it. You don't do it for acknowledgement. Acknowledgement from Allah. And if they criticize you for an amal that you have done, it should not deter you from continuing the amal, because in the first instance it was for Allah. And that's why the Anbiya, all of them continued their da'wah regardless of what happened to them. The worst insults were hailed at them. And in this case, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's doing it for Allah. His ta'alluq is with Allah. His connection is with Allah. So how does he turn to Allah Ta'ala? How does he protest? How does he protest against this injustice that has just happened to him? قال اللهم إليك أشكو ضعف قوتي. He said, Ya Allah, I complain to you of my own weakness, of my own feebleness. He didn't mention them once. وقلة حيلتي. And the lack of my means. I complain to you of my own weaknesses and the lack of the means. وَهَوَانِ عَلَى النَّاسِ. And I complain to you, O Allah, about how lowly they see me. يَا أَرْحَمَ الرَّاحِمِينَ. أنت رب المستضعفين. You are the Rabb of the weak. وأنت ربي, and you are my Rabb. إلى من تكلني? To whom should you leave me, Ya Allah? I'm only relying on you, Allah. To a person who's not related to me, who's attacking me, or to an enemy who has control over me. But then he says, إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ بِكَ عَلَيَّ غَضَبْ فَلَا أُبَالِي. But as long as you are not upset with me, Ya Allah, I don't care. As long as you are not upset, Ya Allah, as long as you are not angry with me, Ya Allah, I don't care. وَلَكِنْ عَافِيَتَكَ أَوْسَعَ لِي. And your afiyat, your pardon, your pleasure is vast for me. That's all I care about, Ya Allah. أعوذ بنور وجهك الذي أشرقت له الظلمات. And I seek refuge in the light of your face which lit all darknesses. وصلح عليه أمر الدنيا والآخرة. And which rectified the affairs of dunya and akhirah. That you must not bring your ghadab on me. Don't bring your anger on me. That's all I care about. لك العتبى حتى ترضى. To you, Ya Allah, is the complaint until you are pleased. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. And there is no might, no power except in you. What a dua. So the angel comes and says, you have this option. We will destroy them. And he, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who's harisun alayhim, he's harisun alayhim, he's ra'uf rahim. He's ra'uf. He says, oh, to the angel, he says, no. Look at the rahmah. He says, no, but I hope that someday somebody from among them would take Islam, become a Muslim, inshallah. That's his hope. I mean, how do you fathom that? How do you even comprehend that? They pelted him, they refused him, they rebuked him, they insulted him, they bled him. And the other day we read the hadith where the narrator says, كأني أنظر إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يحكي نبيا من الأنبياء. He said, as the Sahaba says, I am looking at Rasulullah when he was telling us the story of one of the prophets of the before who was wiping blood off his face, blood from the past, a prophet, previous prophet, wiping blood from his face and said, Allahumma ighfir li qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. Oh Allah, forgive my people because they don't know. And Rasulullah is saying, no, I don't want them to be destroyed. We Muslims nowadays are very quick to make dua of destruction on people. Sahih, very quick, make dua of destruction. I'll finish before you start throwing your bottles at me, inshallah ta'ala. And he said, no, I hope somebody will come from their generation. Look at his basira, his farsightedness and foresightedness. Basra and basira, his farsightedness. Even if they don't get hidayah, that's not, I hope somebody will get hidayah from among that generation. This should be our concern in this country. If not now, hopefully in the future, Islam will spread in this country. But you have to make the effort. Rasulullah didn't sit down, he made the effort. And of course, you know, Muhammad ibn al-Qasim came from that tribe. Muhammad ibn al-Qasim, he was the response to the dua of Rasulullah, and he's the one who took Islam to Hind and Sindh in the year 711. The same year that Islam went to Spain. Same year, 711. You can't forget that number. 711, every time you see the shop 711, remember, Islam went to Spain in 711 and went to Hind and Sindh in the year 711 on the hands of a 17-year-old young man, Muhammad ibn Qasim, who was the dua of Rasulullah because he came from Taif. Muhammad ibn Qasim. You know what that tells us? Even if the person next to you now, your neighbor who's not Muslim, even if he doesn't become Muslim, your dua for him, maybe Allah Ta'ala will make his son or his daughter or their grandchildren become Muslim. Never lose hope. You do only what you can. And trust in Allah Ta'ala. Trust in Allah Ta'ala. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in doing so, was not only teaching us the level of sacrifice that is needed for this deen, but also his concern for people. He wasn't a person, I wasn't sent to curse people. I was sent as a guided mercy to people. Likewise, my brothers and sisters, we should see ourselves as a guided mercy in this country, inshallah. And we ask Allah Ta'ala to utilize us to open the locks on people's hearts. And may Allah Ta'ala utilize us, inshallah, to be the means of hidayah for people, inshallah Ta'ala. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون سلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين وجزاكم الله خير وتصبحوا على خير وعيد مبارك على الجميع. يلا بارك الله فيك.
جزاكم الله خير. قعدت لي صفر